Which brings us to the Gordon growth model. Okay, so the Gordon growth model is basically just this little g right here. This little g right here basically tells us that where the price of the stock is should be D over R. Originally, the price of the stock should be D over R. But not every company is going to grow at the same rate. And not every company is going to grow at the industry rate. So basically what we're saying is that there exists some rate that grows faster or slower than what we expect the discounting to be. What's our discounting? R is our discounting. This R right here is our discounting. This R right here is how we're going to discount. G then becomes the rate of growth. Obviously, it was discovered by some guy named Gordon, so we call it the Gordon growth model. So if we have a rate of growth that is larger than our discounting, then we need the price of the stock to grow up. So we're going to take R and subtract G, which is going to make the denominator smaller, and it's going to make the price of the stock bigger. You may see something in the future that says you have a dividend payment of $2 per year and you have a rate of growth of 7%. Or you have a discounting rate at 7%. If the rate of growth for this particular company is 2%, then what is the price of the stock? Well, this is going to be $2 over 0.05. And if I use my calculator real quick, if I can get to it, 2 divided by 0.05 should be something really easy. Then the price of this stock should be $40. You're going to see that again in the future, I'm sure. Zero growth models is nothing more than this. The zero growth model is the exact same thing, D over R minus G, where G is equal to 0. No big deal. Here's the same example. Basically the same thing we were already doing. Here is $3 divided by 10%, and that's going to mean that our price of the stock should be $30. Variable growth model. I want you to have an idea of a conceptual idea of what this looks like. So basically, a lot of companies are going to grow quickly at first. Think of this as a business cycle. Okay, if I were to follow this with a business cycle model, then my business cycle is going to grow quickly and it's going to kind of stagnate a little bit and then it's going to come back down, right? If this company has a 4-year growth model, then this is my business cycle where this area here, hold on, where this area between here and here is fast growth. And so I'm going to look at this rapid growth phase between here and here, and I'm going to discount this differently than I'm going to discount, again, let me get another color, that I'm going to discount from here moving forward. And that's all that really means, is that we're going to discount this. Note that this is, that we're going to discount this at a different rate. And so here is, if you look at this guy right here, it says D4 with the dividend and payment 4, R minus G sub 2. And so all we're doing here is the same equation, but this is going to be different in this period than it will be up here. This will be D over R minus G sub 1. And so we're using a growth period here that is different than this growth period here, and we're just discounting them separately, right? So you get to here, and this one gets discounted separately from this timeline. The same thing. This time gets separate from this model. That's it. What if there are no dividends? Well, you know what? We'll do this in a set. I'll do it now. See what happens. If there are no dividends, then we have to use what's referred to as the free cash flow approach. This guy. So the free cash flow approach is the idea that if we look at a net income statement, so sales or revenues minus COGS equals gross profit minus expenses equals EBIT minus interest and taxes gives me earnings. Now let's say for a second that you're a large tech company, okay? And you need the money to reinvest. Tech companies are not known to pay dividends, okay? Total dividends for a tech company, zero, non-existent, $0. Those guys, tech companies just don't pay dividends. Why? Because they need to take that money and they need to reinvest it in terms of retained earnings into projects. They need to keep up with technology, so they can invest into projects with the hope that they can increase sales. Since none of this money is going to dividends, let me do this in red. No dividends. Since none of this money is going into dividends, how do we then value the stock? Well, what we can do is look at something like the earnings, or we can look at something like retained earnings. And that's what this means. The net amount of cash flow remaining after the firm has met all operating needs. That would be these earnings after we have paid COGS and expenses and salaries and everything else, interest and taxes, whatever's left over. Even if it doesn't go out in dividends, we can use this as an estimation to do the same thing. So we end up with something that looks like earnings discounted 1 plus R to the 1 plus whatever this is, we call them free cash flows, FCF divided by 1 plus R to the 2 plus blah, 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 blah. Same thing. The only difference is we don't use dividends because there are no dividends getting paid out. We're going to talk about this later in greater detail.